Just trying to set up the live stream to YouTube. It's taking a little bit longer than normal. Okay, done. Redirecting to YouTube. There we go. Okay, fine. Okay. Now, where's this? It's just not showing up. Okay. Technical difficulties. Done. Okay. This week's Parashat Bilam is by far the most bizarre of all the Parashiyot in the Torah Chumash for a number of reasons. But like everything else, you're used to it. You read it year after year. The stories of Yosef and his brothers. Just get used to it, and that's the way it is. I mean, the Torah comes from God. God wrote it. God dictated every letter, every word to Moshe Rabbeinu, told him exactly what to write down, which he did, and we learn it. We learn it, and Rashi explains it, and then the Meforshim explain Rashi, and the Gemara talks about the Pesukim too, and just take it for granted. We all these questions come up, and Rashi tries to deal with them and answer them. But the biggest question of all is a question that we seem to forget, and it's an important perspective to understand in terms of actually what's really going on. Go back to the beginning. You go back to the Garden of Eden, right? When Adam Arishon is being tested, Chava first is the one to interact with the snake. She's the one to really be tested first, and then Adam, but actually not really like that. According to Cabala, Adam was already involved in the sin from a different angle. Chava was more the end of the story. But the Chumash is dealing with Pshat. It's dealing with the simple explanation, the simple story, the simple message for the average individual. And it's up to the person themselves to decide to go deeper and deeper. And of course, the deeper you go and you go into Kabbalah, it's amazing how the same verse can mean so much more and something so different when it originally did when you started out. But it's just perspective. It's imagine like standing watching something. Let's say you're watching people in the street do something, and you think you're the last person in line to watch this. Everyone else is in front of you, and all of a sudden someone talks from behind you and says, "That's amazing, eh?" And you turn around like you're a little shocked, and you realize that you were watching, but you were being watched watching something else. And it's kind of the same thing in the Garden of Eden. There's Adam Arishon, there's Chava, right? There's the Nachash, not really the same place, but they're being tested, and the atmosphere, the presentation is as if Hashem is not there. Because if you could see, it's like a child who's taking the cookie from the cookie jar that the parents said, do not take without permission. And they look around and they see the parents not there, but really the parents watching from a corner that the child can't see, or maybe the parent even installed closed circuit TV, some type of camera, video camera, a security camera to watch the cookie jar. But the child thinks he's innocent. He thinks he's getting away with it. He thinks there's nothing wrong. And all of a sudden the parent says, I can see that. And wow, you were here the whole time? Yeah, I was watching the entire time. I've used as an analogy this type of idea in terms of divine providence, the mashal being, the parable being that somebody who comes for a job interview and he's politely told to sit down in a small little waiting area and to help himself, make himself comfortable, and they'll call him when they're ready for him. And he sits down and he, passes a couple of minutes and he realizes he's getting bored, taking a lot longer than he thought. So he picks up a magazine and he, flips through it and puts it down, takes another one. And when he took the first one, it was a nice, neatly organized pile, right? It was a nice, neatly arranged pile that clearly someone had taken the time to organize, right? But he doesn't pay attention to that. He puts one in, puts then you all live from different places, right? And then he gets thirsty and he notices the coffee machine over there. So it says, please help yourself to coffee. So he gets up and he takes a cup of coffee. There's even clean glasses waiting for him. And he takes a cup of coffee and when he's finished his coffee, which tasted wonderful, then he goes ahead and he puts it back in the sink. This goes on my shul all the time. You come in the shul, people in the morning, and the place is perfectly clean. You come back in the day, there's coffee cups, coffee all over the counter. Like what are people thinking? What are people thinking? This put it back to where you found it. This is people spend money to be able to keep the place. And it even says on the wall, please mind the cleanliness of the place because we can't keep cleaning up after you. And this guy goes in and puts it into the sink and he leaves it there, right? After about 20 minutes, they finally come and say, Mr. So-and-so, you can go home now. He says, but I came for the interview. And they say, well, you already had it. And he says, what do you mean I already had it? He says, well, that camera in the corner, we've been watching the entire time. I don't know if that's legal, but we've been watching the entire time. He said, what do you mean watching? Watch. We wanted to see if you were respectful of somebody else's property. The Gemara actually has a case like this. The Gemara says that they caught somebody who was a thief. They didn't know who the thief was. He stole a goblet, a silver goblet. They didn't know who he was. But when they went to wash Natilas Yadayim, can you imagine this? He's washing Natilas Yadayim to make a motzi on bread, and he can't find a towel. So what does he do? He uses somebody else's, clothing or something that's hanging around. And the moment they see the lack of respect he has for other people's property, they say this is the thief, and he took the cup in the end. And they said we wanted to see, if you're respectful or not. And we saw you took a magazine, you didn't put them back in the pile nice and neatly for the next person. You're welcome to have a cup of coffee, which you offer, you took it for yourself, but you didn't wash it out and put it back the way you found it. Well, I thought someone else did that at the end of the day. I'm sure you did, but that doesn't mean you should do it yourself. That's just the way we're looking. Listen, in another office, that might not make a difference. Another office, they might overlook that or not even care if you do that because they have a cleaning person coming in at the end of the day who washes all their cups and puts them away. And they don't care as long as you do your work in the course of the day. But we're looking for team members. We're looking for people who care about other people. And you exhibited a lack of respect. So as far as we're concerned, you're not the one we're looking for. So thank you for coming in, but it's not a good fit. And that's really life. All of life is that way. As it says, always beware. It's a mission in Pirkei Avos, right? Never forget the fact that there's an eye watching you the entire time. God is constantly watching you. So it's like in the Garden of Eden, it was it looked like God wasn't there. He was somewhere else. In fact, the Medrash says that Adam was out on a teal, some type of a little trip, in the Garden of Eden, and God was with him. But of course, God's everywhere at all times. So God knew exactly what was going on at every single second, and nothing happens. Nothing happens until finally, after they eat, they make the mistake and they hide, and then God says, "Where are you, Ayaka? Where are you?" And it's like the first time. Even in this week's Parashat, Bilam says, actually, God says to Bilam, he says, who are these people who have come to you? And Bilam, for all of his genius, intelligence, thinks that this means that God doesn't see everything going on at all times. Otherwise, why would he ask that question? Cain had already made the same mistake. After he killed his brother, God said to Cain, "Where's your brother? Where is he?" Right? And Cain says, "Do I know? Shema Anochi, right? Am I my brother's keeper?" Words that ring out all through history. And Cain thinks for 1 second that God's asking the question. It means like as if God's saying, "I don't know where he is. Like, did you see him? Tell me where he is." But God knows the entire time. He sees the entire thing, which means he was right there as Cain was tricking Hevel and eventually murdering him. He watched it happen. He was right there watching it. In fact, there's a flip medrash, so to speak, the other way around, where after Shaul went and raised up Shmuel from the dead, which you're not supposed to do, but he did, and he spoke to him, and Shmuel had told him that tomorrow you and your sons are going to be with me on my side of the line, so to speak. So in other words, you're going to go to the battle and fight the Givonim, and you're going to all die in battle, the king and the sons, all the princes and all that, and that's it. That's the end of you. Right? And what happens? He actually goes, rather than run away and try to avoid the crisis in the situation, he actually goes to battle as if he can win. He fights to the death. And the Medrash says that at that point in time, HaKadosh Baruch Hu called together all the angels and said, "Psst, psst, come on over here." Right? What? What's going on? And God says, "You asked me back at the beginning, why make man? Why make man? You want the answer to your question? There it is right there. This man knows that he's about to die. with his sons, and he goes to fight on behalf of the Jewish people with everything he has. That is noble. That is greatness. That is godliness. And that is alone justifies creation. But the point is that God's watching the whole thing. Now, did Shaul see this? Did Shmuel, Shmuel was dead, but did anyone else? David and Melech? No, no one else saw it. No one else heard it. It's almost like an operating theater, right? An operating theater, where they have the surgeon downstairs, operating the patient with all the doctors around him, nurses and all that. And then they have this second level where people can watch the operation take place to learn whatever, to see what's going on, right? So it's called a theater because they're basically watching it. I don't think it's very entertaining, but they're watching this thing take place, and that's almost what it seems like from the Medrash that was going with God. Like he was standing upstairs, Kiviyochel, in the operating theater with all the angels looking down, watching the whole thing. But there's always the way it is. God's watching the entire thing happen the entire time. The Jewish people, did they know that Balaam was up in the hills trying to curse them and change their destiny? Maybe yes, maybe no. Moshe probably did for sure, being a Navi first of all, and God told him everything, and he had a great sense of things. So he may have known that was going on, but the Jewish people going about their business as if everything is perfectly okay. And God's acting as if it's like he's only coming in and going out, but the whole thing is staged. It's all God the entire time. The whole thing is, God is there the entire, just like in the Garden of Eden, as Cain and Hevel, they're doing their, so Adam, Rishon, and Chava are doing their thing, with the Nachash and the snake, and God's right there the entire time, breathing down their necks. They just can't feel it. And watching every last detail and keeping quiet, not saying a peep. Don't do that. I wouldn't do that if I were you. No, he's not doing that. I already gave them the information. I already gave them the instructions. Now let's see how they do on their own. But I'm right here watching the entire thing. We go about this all the time, right? It says, some of the amudim in the Beit Knesset, where the chazan goes up to daven, they often have some type of pasuk to inspire you, to keep you focused while you're leading the tzibur. It really is for everybody, but he has to look at it. Da lifnei me'ato med, right? Know before whom you stand. Well, just now, just as you're going to the amud, right? And you're standing before, sometimes they even have it make it into a pit, right? They make the place where the chazan stands lower than the rest of the floor, so you become more contrite when you're actually leading and realize what you're doing and who you're standing before. But just now, not when you're davening with the minyan, not at all times. I mean, he's there the entire time. But he gives this impression that he's not. And you have to wonder, like, what's going on? Like, from heaven's perspective, what's actually going on? Because the way the story is portrayed, the way that we read it, the way that we're like that person watching the event take place in the street, oblivious to the fact that there are people behind us watching it too. But they're quiet, so we don't know they're there. And all of a sudden someone says or sneezes or something, and all of a sudden we realize, oh, there's someone behind me, right? And not only, before I was just the observer, now I'm also the one being observed. But I know that. Like the guy in the waiting room waiting for the interview, he thought he was just there minding his own business, but he was being observed the entire time. And so God, Akash Baruch Hu, we're supposed to learn from all this. It's similar to another Gemara. The Gemara says in Avodah Zarah that at the end of days, when God goes to judge the nations of the world, they're all going to clamor, to get in, and it says they come by Arvuvia. They're all mixed. It's not even orderly the way they come in, and that itself also teaches you something. But this is not this world. This is the next world. They're all fighting to get in, right? And God says to the Romans, what do you have to say for yourself? What did you accomplish in this world that I should pay attention to, and not condemn you to the opposite of going to heaven, right? To Gehenna, or even just oblivion, just to disappear altogether. So the Romans say, oh, we built bathhouses, and we accumulated, and we made all kinds of money, and we made shukim, all kinds of marketplaces, and we did it all for the sake of the Jewish people. So Kodesh Baruch Hu answers back and says, Shotim ba'olam, fools, world-class fools. But as the Brisker Rebbe points out, it doesn't say shakranim ba'olam, it doesn't say liars. He says Shotim ba'olam, fools. What's the difference? Well, a liar means you're not telling the truth, but they're not telling the truth. Everyone knows they didn't do it for the sake of the Jewish people, but the answer is that at that stage of history, in the future, they know that everything that happened in history was for the sake of the Jewish people. See, today they might just say it because that's what God wants to hear. But in that at that stage of history where the truth, is clear that God was running the world the entire time, never step back. They're telling the truth. They're saying we now know that everything was for the sake of the Jewish people, all the things that we built, all the things we accomplished, was all for the sake of Klal Yisrael. So that's why God says, you're right. So I'm not going to call you liars because that is the truth, and you are saying the truth. But I'm going to call you fools because if you think for 1 second that I'm going to believe that that was your intention when you did all those things, it was all for you. It was all for you. Now, the Jews might have benefited from that. They might have gained from that. We know the Gemara talks about cases with Tanaim going to the bathhouses. They used the Roman bathhouses. In fact, there's a very famous account where there's an avodah zarah set up in one of the bathhouses, and the Roman turns to this rabbi, this Rav, this Tana, and says, "How can you come in here? You people don't believe in idol worship, and here's an idol right here." Right? So he comes and he explains halachically why it's not a problem. But they used the bathhouses and the shukim, as long as we weren't being killed and murdered and being chased, that we bought things in the shuk. Right? And the money, God says, no, it's all mine anyhow. I'm the one who makes the money. It all belongs to me. Why is that different than other things? That's another trying to. And then the Persians come and they try that as well. And all the nations, one after the other, tried the exact same thing. God says, Shoti ba'olim, right? Meaning that you're right. Now you know the truth now, but you didn't know the truth back then. When you did it, it was because of you. But it was for the sake of the Jewish people. I put it into your head. I was the one that made you think about building a marketplace, and in that specific place, for some Jew that might come through at some point in time, and if not directly, then indirect, somehow it all has to come back to the Jewish people. That's what this parsha is really telling you, right? God says to Bilam, he says that you can't curse them because they are blessed people. Blessed doesn't just mean that a lot of good. Boy, those words they over history with a blessing like that, people might want to be cursed instead. What does a curse look like? I mean, we've gone through the Romans, we went through the Greeks first, and the Romans, and before even the Greeks, the Persians, and after that we went through the Crusades for hundreds of years, and after the Crusades, all the pogroms and the pogroms later on, and then eventually the anti-Semitism of Europe, and finally the Holocaust, and now the world's right now back to hating the Jews once again. So it's like, where's the blessing? Where's the blessing in all of that? Because it certainly doesn't feel like it a lot of the time. Now, I mean, I personally can complain. Baruch Hashem, I certainly feel that the Jewish people are blessed. It's been a very good period of history, but there are families right now mourning the loss of children because their sons were killed in battle, or people mourning people who died from cancer early. Not everybody feels so blessed. If you happen, or even with that, they still can. But it's been a good generation. But over historically, there's a book called "The Causes and Effect of actually the book is called Anti-Semitism: The Causes and Effects of a Prejudice." And it's not really a novel of any sort. It's really just more of a history book, accounting for all the anti-Semitism over the last 2,000 years, basically since the temple was destroyed. Events and whatever details were known, numbers as much as possible, and what took place. And I'll tell you, I was learning it only because I needed it for a project I was working on, and it's one of the and I just couldn't keep reading it. I had to read it in stages. It's just too overwhelming. One after the other after the other. If you look at that book, you have to ask the question, where's the blessing? So, arguably, you could say that we had it and we lost it. If we had kept doing the right thing, if we had simply stayed on track, if we received the Torah and lived by the Torah and never strayed from the Torah, then that blessing that God spoke about to Bilam in this week's parsha would have been clear to everybody the world over. But there's a story, right? There's a story about a Warsaw ghetto. He was a survivor until the end, but one of the last. And the Germans, the Nazis, were about to destroy the entire ghetto, and he was one of the resistant fighters at that time, still trying to fight. It doesn't sound like he was that religious at the time when it started, for whatever reason. And but towards the end, he left some type of diary behind in a bottle, and he took notes, waiting for the end to come because there wasn't much they could do at that point in time. And when he began writing, according to what I read, I don't know the whole thing, but what they wrote about what he wrote was that he began to question why it was that the Nazis, Yamach Shemuzechram, spent so much effort and time and manpower. It might have lost in the war. Many people hold that the reasons why the Nazis lost the war, especially in the Eastern Front, is because so much manpower was devoted to the concentration camps and the Holocaust, and so much energy and so much, they had to divert, trains and build the tracks and all just to get rid of the Jews. If he hadn't focused on the Jews, maybe he would have won the war, God forbid. But that's what he did. That was his mandate. That was his whole thing. He actually said at one point in time, I'm not at war with the Americans, the British, or the Russians. I'm at war with the Jewish people. It just happens to be that the capitalists and the communists and everything, they're all getting involved. They're all fighting against me. So I've got to go to war against. But if they just left me alone and just let me, take out, get rid of the Jews, I would leave them alone too. And he said, anyhow, capitalism and communism, it all comes from the Jews anyhow. So we have to get rid of them. Only fascism is not a Jewish thing, which is very telling, right? But the blessing, right? It wasn't clear, but this man began to question it. And it's what I read. I can't personally verify it, but I came from a reliable source. And as he began to question, he began to realize it didn't make sense. It wasn't logical. It was lamalam netev. It was supernatural. The whole thing. It was bad. It was evil. It was so much negativity happening to the Jewish people. But nevertheless, there was a supernatural quality about it. And his final entry, right? He ends up saying the only explanation is it's got to be God. It's got to be God for whatever reason. Like it, don't like it, but it's got to be God. It's the only thing that can explain all that's going on. And the last words were Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. What a very heroic but bizarre way to come to do tshuva. I mean, most people go the other direction, I think, but this person, he saw through. He had that bigger, broader perspective. He was able to step back. Most people only saw what was going on in front of them. He stepped back a few rows, so to speak, to see what was actually going on in the bigger picture. And that bigger picture revealed things to him about the Jewish people, about history that everybody else was missing. And in that, even in that, he was able to see the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he saw that as a blessing. There's another story, right? Another remarkable story. Again, it's just, these are Gemaras, and we learn them and we read them. I've been involved in shiurim, about the Gemara and Tisha B'Av, about Kamsa Ubar Kamsa, and the whole story about how he got offended and it led to the Romans coming and the destruction of the temple and all that. Is such a long story. Every year we go over it. But there's one piece in that story that's probably the most important part of the entire story. And of course, it gets stepped right over. What is that part? So it says, after the Romans were convinced by Bar Kamsa that the Jewish people were rebelling, which they weren't, but he made them believe that they were. So then they sent this guy, this general called Nero. They call him a Caesar, right? But he wasn't the Caesar of Rome. His name is actually Neron in the Gemara. It doesn't say Nero, right? But it says Neron. And he's leading this massive army on its way to Jerusalem to do battle. And it says that he wanted to know whether he was going to be successful in battle or not. Now, in Roman times, usually, from what I understand, when Romans wanted to know whether they're going to be successful or not, they took a Roman priest and they cut open an animal, and somehow they looked at the insides of the animal, and that told them, I mean, they made the whole thing up, but they acted as if it told them, I think most of the time they told them, yeah, you'll be successful. even if they weren't, because you don't tell a Roman general you're not going to be successful because that's the end of your job. But that's what they would do. But this Roman decides to do something a little bit trickier, a little more interesting. He shoots an arrow in the opposite direction, and it goes to Jerusalem. He shoots an arrow to the sides, and it still goes to Jerusalem. Obviously, the one going to Jerusalem will go to Jerusalem. That's not a problem, right? But they all go to Yerushalayim. And he realizes at that point in time something's up. So he does another strange, bizarre thing for Roman to do. He turns to a child who came from Cheder and says, "Tell me the passage you were focusing on, what you learned today in Cheder." Okay, that's what it says. And the child, I forget the pasuk in Hebrew, but the pasuk basically says that God is taking out his wrath upon the Jewish people. So this Neron fellow says to himself, "I see what's going on over here. This is what God's telling me." He plans to avenge Torah and himself by destroying the Jewish people, and he's going to wipe his hands on me. I'm going to be his fall guy. It's his plan. He's leading me, but I'm the one who's going to pull the trigger. So I'll be the one who's blamed historically. Now, if you were Neron and you actually did all that stuff and you really believed this type of a conclusion, what would you do? And I think most other Romans, they would have said, "Charge, right? Let's go. Let's we're going to be successful. What else can you ask for? I'll go back to Rome. They'll put one of these little things in my head and make me give me a higher position, pension, all these things, right? Because I was successful in battle on behalf of the Roman Empire." That's what every other Roman would have done, not this Neron. So, okay, if you're not going to do that, then second best is you desert, right? You had the main course, and now you desert, right? You just go and leave the army behind. You go someplace else. You run away. You don't want to be God's fall guy, so you just leave, hide. You can't go back to Rome; they'll kill you, right? So you go someplace else. You take off you take off whatever signs of authority, and you try to disappear into the world. So you don't have to face the Romans for not doing what you are to do, but you don't have to face God either for having carried out his master plan. That's not what he does. He joins the Jewish people. He goes ahead and he joins the Jewish people. It's crazy. Why? It's like saying, "Why don't you take your own gun, put it to your head, and shoot yourself?" You just finished concluding from the Simani, the arrows being shot. You just finished concluding that God plans to destroy the Beis Hamikdash and exile the Jewish people. And you want to join them? What are you, a masochist? It almost reminds me of the halachas of Gerus, right? The halachas of Gerus, of converting somebody, is not just, "Oh, come on in, we've been waiting for you. Please have a cup of coffee. We'll get right to the conversion as soon as possible," like every other religion likes to do. Not Judaism. "No, come back tomorrow. Like, go home, think about it some more. You only have 7 mitzvahs to do. Not even that at this point because you lost that as well. But you become a Jew, you definitely have as many of the Yag mitzvahs you can perform to do now as well. So, why take on all that responsibility? Think about it. Come back again another day. Guy can for another day, right? So, okay, you decide you still want to do it, fine. But take a look at Jewish history. Take a look at what's gone on with this nation of ours. And you want to become a part of that? And at that point in time, if the future convert, the potential convert says specifically, I know that history. I see what God, I'm not new to all this, right? And I specifically want to join the Jewish people. You convert them. That's a real convert. That's an authentic convert. Now, doesn't mean that only masochists need apply, because that's not what we're after either. But and today when someone converts to the Jewish people, they may know Jewish history, but they hope that's not going to come back again, that there won't be pogroms in the future. But even still, just to join, just to become part of the Jewish people, with all those mitzvahs and all the lifestyle. I mean, if you're a Gentile, you can sleep until 7, 8 o'clock in the morning and not run the minyan, right? But you want to be the Torah observant Jew, you have to daven in minyan. And the earlier the better, especially you have to have a job to work at the same time and get it all fit in, and halachas and kashrus and tremendous amount of inconveniences. and you still want to become part of that, fine, you belong. You have the material for that type of a thing. Another story, right? It says that Uncleas, Uncleas the Ger, that's what he's called, Uncleas the Ger, right? I mean, I still can't get my head around this, how somebody like that, especially in Roman times, can convert and become part of the Jewish people when there was such the opposite direction things were going, and not just that, but have the merits to have his translation of the Chumash on the same page as the Chumash and Rashi. That is amazing. And it's there. And he converted to Judaism. And what happened? He was trying to decide to do with his life. He didn't know what to do with his life. So he brought up what's his name? Hadrian, I think it was his uncle. Right? He brought up Hadrian from the dead, and he asked him, in those days, it was a common thing to do. It was like usually, Saturday night activity was to bring people back from the dead and ask them questions for the rest of the week. Not exactly like that, but they did it a lot. And he brought him up from the dead, and he asked him, what should I do with my life? Who should I join? And he said, you should invest yourself into something that's not valuable today that will become valuable in the future. So he does and goes ahead and becomes part of the Jewish people. And so his uncle then, I don't know, asked him, why did you do that? This is the Jewish people who are getting killed and slaughtered. And he said, because I followed your advice. He said, choose something that today is low in value, but in the future will be very high in value. That's good business, investment. And the Jewish people today mean nothing. No one values them. No one respects them. No one understands their importance. But I can tell you that one day in the future they will. And I'll be part of them when that happens. And they'll want to join when it'll be too late. Because the Gemara says there's no conversion in the Messianic year. Because it's like knowing the answers to the exam. What's the point? You can't take it anymore. They see the bracha. They see the bracha. Uncleas, he saw the bracha, right? This Niran, he saw the bracha. This person in Warsaw, even in the 1940s, it's such a terrible situation. I don't even know how many people maybe converted, but there weren't a lot of people who converted, or at least became Chosi B'tshuva because of the Holocaust. More than likely, it was the other thing. And that's why there's this term called holy disbelievers, because what they went through was enough to make anybody question God's involvement in life, as if he went away. It was the concept of Estapanim, the concept of God hiding his face. But here's the point. He never really does. It's a posture that God takes, so to speak, for the sake of free will, for the sake of man. In other words, the same way a person can achieve geula personally, even while the rest of the nation's still struggling to get there, it's possible. You might think that geula is this reality. Obviously there is a big difference between somebody who's still living in New York experience. Well, the truth is, in Chutz La'aretz is not the same type of an idea, but certainly in Eretz Yisrael, it's possible for a person to get to a level of redemption that the rest of the nation has yet to achieve through Torah and mitzvahs and maisim tovim. We see these people, we see them, we might even interact with them, and we see they're different. There's something different about them, but we ascribe it to their greatness, their holiness, their purity, their perspective in life, But other than that, you can touch and feel them. They feel exactly the same way, but they do maybe not get so involved in the physical world. They live in a whole different reality. And unless you understand what that is, the same thing is true, is that, in Cabala, there's an expression, a really bizarre one. It's such the first time I heard it, I couldn't even get my head around it. I couldn't understand what it meant. It was like saying it's night and day at the same time, right? Well, how? Okay, no, different parts of the world, yes, but not in one spot. Don't tell me it's night and day where I'm standing right now. But that's what this statement says. It says, Hester panim, ze gili panim. The hiding of God's face is in fact the revealing of God's face. How does that work? How do you hide God's face and at the same time you reveal it? So then the simplest analogy is that if a person wants to look at the sun, They can't, not without something over their eyes, some protective device, because the way the eyes are made and the amount of light coming off the sun is so brilliant, not to mention the other things that it's sending out as well, right, are so brilliant that if a person were to look at the sun even a little bit, it can blind them. Certainly, if you happen to look for one split second, for the first few seconds after, you can't see anything. Your eyes are like sun in your eyes until finally the eyes adjust. But soon, if you stare at the sun, the person will go blind. What if a person wants to, but you see all these pictures of the sun, right? In magazines, science magazines and science books, they have pictures of the sun. So how do they get that picture? Filters, lots and lots of filters. So the hiding of the light is actually the revealing of the light, but it's not really true. If you want to revise a statement to be more accurate, it'd be more like the hiding of some of the light allows for the revelation of some of the light. So it's not really contradiction. It sounds like a contradiction at first because it sounds like all or nothing. The hiding of the light sounds like the complete hiding of the light is the revealing of the light, which sounds like the complete revealing of the light, but that's not what Cabala is saying. Cabala is saying, well, let's take the sun, for example, that if you want to look at the sun, it's worth it to you to reduce the amount of, the intensity of the sun. So you can't see the full intensity of the sun, that's for sure. But it's worth it so you can see a little bit of it anyhow. So by blocking some of the light allows you to see the rest of the light, so to speak. So the same thing is true when it comes to God. God's light so intense, so sublime, so unified that really nothing could exist other than the light itself. But that's not what God wanted. God wanted to create something that could exist and connect to him, can come to know him, can choose to know him, can make a point of relating to him and revealing him in creation. That's our whole job, just to reveal the reality of God in creation. So what does he do? So he hides his light, but not all of it, just some of it. He filters it in order to reveal the part that we can relate to and connect to. So the same thing is true. If a person ascends spiritually, they can reach higher levels of light because as they become better equipped to deal with that light, to live with that light, the more they can be exposed without dying. When Moshe says to God, "Show me your glory," God says, "I cannot show you my face because no man can see my face and live. But I can show you the back," God says. I can show you the back of my head. There's all kinds of different explanations exactly what that means. I mean, you can't see me coming, but you'll see me going after the fact. But that's good. That's great. But it's not as good as seeing you coming in the end. But that was because it was the beginning of the 40 days. It was the golden calf episode. At the end of the golden calf, Moshe had not yet become Moshe Rabbeinu in the full sense of the term. Later on, that was not the case anymore. God began to reveal his light more and more and more, to finally, in Parshas Bahalosecha, which is not so much after, but it's still, still past Har Sinai, when it says that Moshe will not lead the Jewish people into Eretz Yisrael or Canaan, God tells Miriam and Aaron, assume it's because he's making a mistake. He's not fitting. He lost the merit to lead them in. And God says, no, it's because he's gone so high already in the spiritual totem pole. He's so high up already that you are no longer capable of being brought into Israel by him. Because if he brings you, he's Mashiach, and you're not capable of the Messianic era yet. So therefore, he's not going in, not because of him, but because of you. And that's what he says in Parashat Eschanan. He says, because of you, I'm not going in. And really, because you hit the rock. God said, you can't go in because you didn't believe in me. Now, that was just a pretext. The real reality is I even if that was a mistake, I prayed so many times that God says, don't pray one more time. He prayed one more time. I'm going to have to cancel out the decree against you. And so Moshe says, that's exactly what I want. And God says, yes, it may be what you want, but not what history needs. Why? Because if you lead them in, you'll be Mashiach, you'll build the base of Mikdash. The Mashiach, the base of Mikdash the Mashiach builds can't be destroyed. The Jewish people, on the other hand, they're still making mistakes. They're doing sin still. And they'll need to be punished. And if there's a temple that can be destroyed, I can take that in their place and they can continue to exist. But if there's a temple that cannot be destroyed, then I have to destroy them. So Moshe says it's because of you, not because of me. because you will still do averas. I'm ready to lead the nation and bring out the Messianic era, but you're not capable of living. The Vilna Gaon was on his way in the end of the 1700s to Eretz Yisrael. It says in Kol Torah on the way before he left, he was on the level of Mashiach ben Yosef, the first level of Mashiach. While traveling, and had he stayed in that level, he could have gone to Eretz Yisrael. But while traveling, he got to the level of Mashiach ben David, and the world wasn't ready for Mashiach ben David yet. So therefore, he was told by Makubal to turn around and go back home because it's just not time. It's not right for him to be there, and he was forced to do that. Here we are, hundreds of years later, still waiting for Mashiach to reveal himself. The blessing that God is telling Bilam about doesn't mean that we're so protected that we cannot be damaged, we cannot be hurt. On Tuesday, gave a shir about a concept about to do the tefillah and staying in the light of God and how that protects us. But you see, by the end of the parsha, whatever God said, it comes undone. Yes, Bilam gets killed in the process, as does Balak and everybody, all the bad guys, they go. But so does 24,000 of the tribe of Shimon, and 176,000 other Jews get capital punishment for being involved in idol worship due, again, to Bilam and Balak and their plan. So, as impervious as we weren't so impervious. We were vulnerable. Okay, it's not millions, but still a lot. And all you need is a little bit to be affected. That's why Amalek attacked the Jewish people. He didn't kill the main parts of the Jewish people. He killed the stragglers. But the fact that he could do any damage encouraged other nations to find other ways to do it. And here we are, still being attacked by the nations of the world because of that back there. And it's not what the blessing's about. What's the blessing about? When God says, see, because it was Bilam, he wasn't, even though it was Balak's plan, only to keep the Jewish people. That's what the Medrash says. Balak said to Bilam that I don't expect to wipe them all out. I know I can't do that. Sich and Og, they couldn't do that. Others can't do it. I don't just keep them out of the country. Just keep them from going to Eretz Israel. That's all you have to do. And as long as they don't come in, the world will not become messianic in any way, and we can all go about our business as normal. They'll do their thing, we'll do our thing. Well, that's what I want. They come to Eretz Israel. In fact, the Gemara says, if all 600,000 males between 20 and 60 across the Jordan River at one time, then that would have neutralized the Sitra Achra, the Satan, and that would have brought the Messianic here right then and there. So just keep that number from crossing the border. And they were successful, not just here with Shimon and the idol worshippers, but also in Parshas Matos when Reuben, Gad, Menashe say, we like it over here on the east side of the Jordan. We want to stay. And Moshe was like, do you understand that for 40 years we've been wandering and people have been dying off because your ancestors did the same thing? Oh, well, we'll fight for it. Hopeless. And that is Bilam and Balak. And unless you don't get the idea, but if you don't yearn and long to live in Eretz Yisrael today, that's not inside you, you might live in chutzlarts, but if you don't long, you've been shot by Bilam. That's what he was aiming for. Because don't forget, he was looking all the way down the road, thousands of years down the road, to keep the Jewish people from bringing the Messianic era as long as possible. He expected to live a longer life. And then he died about 34 years of age because he's an evil person. So he got killed. But he was operating on behalf of all the evil people of history. That was the whole goal. Being blessed, when God's talking about this nation is blessed, it means that they have a mission. They have a destiny. There's nothing you can do to shake them out of it. You're going to try to undo that destiny. That's what this is about. You're going to try to get them to leave behind their responsibility. It's not going to happen. I've made sure of that. Yeah, you'll affect some stragglers along the way, like Amalek did. Yes, you'll be able to pull some people out and get involved in Gilead rice and things like that. And Avodah Zarah, yes, you'll be able to get Jews to reject the land. But the overall destiny, the bigger picture, I've got my finger on it the entire time. I'm watching. I'm overseeing that the entire, whether they know it, they don't know it, they see it, they don't see it, doesn't make a difference. I am on their case the entire history. Being blessed means I will never forsake them in terms of the master plan of history. They are the ones who were chosen to carry it out, and they're the ones who are going to see the end come to fruition. And there's nothing you can do about that. As try as you might, right? It's not going to work. It's not going to happen. That's what we have to realize. We watch what's going on around us. There's missiles falling, there's shrapnel and people getting killed, whether they're inside the shelters, not inside the shelters, and it looks like they're being able to do harm to us. And where is the hand of God? And where is the blessing that's supposed to protect us? It's there. People live and people die because God determines that's when they have to, either stay or go. It's all, and really, it's the only question you have is how will you go? Will you go doing something silly, ridiculous, and meaningless? Or will you go as someone protecting the land of Israel, whether by actually fighting for it or just living here, making a life here, trying to support the economy in Eretz Israel from Eretz Israel is also part of that as well. It's a meaningful thing, it's a meaningful way to go. Because the day a person's supposed to go doesn't make a difference where you're in the world. Doesn't make a difference. But how you go, that's a choice you make. And that determines very much two things. Number one, if you will be plugged in to that blessing, that bracha, that ultimate goal for history, and whether or not God sees you that way as well. Because when somebody does understand this and live with that reality and connects to it despite what's going on around them, they're in forever. And that's one of the main messages of this week's Parsha. The Jewish people are down below doing their own thing. They're not even involved. Moshe doesn't even come up in the whole Parsha. It's all Balak and Bilam and a Kodesh Baruch Hu and a donkey. Right? That's all the people talking. But it's all for the sake of the Jewish people. It's all to help them fulfill their destiny. It's up to us to take that destiny, to grab it, to make it our own, and never let go and never lose faith. Shabbat Shalom.